Hey guys, I'm Saulcy. I'm the partnership manager.
Hi everyone, my name's Sage and I'm the International Response Manager with All Hands and Hearts.
And we are checking in with you on Facebook Live here from Nassau in the Bahamas, where we are in our second week now doing an assessment of the damage from Hurricane Dorian. We are part of the Disaster Assessment Response Team, or DART.
Yeah, to give you guys just a little bit of background on what we've been doing the last week. So a team of 5, arrived on the ground last Monday. We landed here in Nassau, and it was important for us when we landed to be able to plug into the larger coordination system that's happening here. It's developed a lot even in the last week, so that now that larger coordination system is being ran by the UN OCHA as well as NEMA, which is the National Emergency Management Agency. So a lot of our time here in Nassau has been spent engaging with different actors within that coordination system. And then we also have a team that on Wednesday, I believe, flew to Abaco to begin work on the ground there in terms of assessing the damage and the things they could get to, as well as trying to work on the logistics needed in order for us to begin our work there.
I think a lot of people were really blown away by the scale of damage that occurred across Abaco, the many keys that are located nearby, as well as Grand Bahama. And so one of the pieces that we were really kind of blown away by initially was how many humanitarian efforts, the search and rescue effort was still proceeding when we first got on the ground. And one thing that organizations like us that are focused on early recovery are always being mindful of is how do we develop capacity to engage, our response teams to get volunteers on the ground, but not do it in a way that takes away capacity from an island whose resources are already very limited. So we've been, really walking that balance, cultivating capacity without taking it away from people who need it, so that we can create those opportunities, but we do it sustainably. So
yeah, and to give a little more background on kind of the larger coordination system that's happening here. So when we originally got on the ground, it had been organized by the private sector essentially, and they had seen the influx of all of these organizations coming in. So they had arranged a coordination system to kind of bring everyone together. And as the search and rescue operations were continuing, the UN also arrived and lended their expertise in continuing that coordination moving forward. So the UN OCHA, which is the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, has taken the lead in regard, as well as with NEMA, which I mentioned. And then within that, they're using the ESF support functions. So ESF are the emergency support functions, and that's how they divide out the different sectors of work. So for example, we're engaged in the education ESF, as well as logistics and shelter. And that's a way for us to connect with other agencies and actors directly in order to collaborate and share information and make it a more holistic response.
There's this very short window of time where the media and all of these resources are surging into a space like this, where the humanitarian agencies have the capacity to mobilize their network of donors to connect to the public and let them know what's going on the ground. And so you have this very short moment where you're trying to make sure that all of those resources can be engaged in a way that's going to both address those immediate needs. You need to get people meals, you need to get them immediate shelter, but for groups like us, it's about how can we mobilize that energy and translate it into the long-term recovery, into the phase that we know is going to last for years. And so the coordination functions are a really key aspect of how we can build that type of sustainability. So you have, OCHA, who is doing the very big picture, pushing organizations to engage those collaborative functions. And then there are the relationships that we develop with our NGO counterparts, both on the local level. There's a lot of really great organizations, both relief-oriented, education-oriented, distribution-oriented, that we're working to connect to and plug into and build capacity for. But then there are the much bigger organizations. A lot of folks will kind of immediately think of groups like the Red Cross getting on the ground or the United Nations Development Program, but there are many others kind of niche organizations that are doing really great work as well. We're excited to see, World Central Kitchen is here. We're excited to see our friends at Good 360 here. A lot of folks with those different capacities, and the question is, how can we layer our different services in a way that there's as much coverage as possible so that all of this energy can be translated into a successful recovery process. But then beyond that, how can we make sure that it's coordinated with government resources? So the other kind of key aspect of how we're engaging with NEMA, with SEDEMA as well, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Public Works, the Ministry of Environment and Housing, all of these different, NGOs are working to plug into those ministries so that ultimately, whether it be about pieces like building code or plugging into a debris management system, there's a much more holistic picture that our capacities are building into. That process is definitely quite a bit slower, but we've been really excited to see all of these government officials, really pushing forward to see these NGOs built up so that we can do as much service as effectively as possible.
And that gives a pretty good idea of what Ashley and I have been working on here in Nassau. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a team on Great Abaco, and they are focused very much so on the tactical operations that we need in order to get started. So we know a lot of questions came through on when can we get there and when can we get to work, and we are trying as hard as we can to make sure that we can get to work as soon as possible. There are a lot of logistical challenges on Great Abaco. So one of the main challenges our team faced first was just transportation. Almost all the vehicles were not in use. And so it's been really challenging for all the actors on the ground to be able to get around. Additionally, we need a base of operations. We need a place to stay. So that has been a main goal of the team there, is to try and find a base of operations so that we can start getting people in and getting to work. And then additionally, we're developing our scope of work and identifying what are the greatest areas of need, both in location and type of work, and how can we fill the gaps that are not being met?
Yeah, so I think this gives us a good chance to start talking about some of the questions that we got in and then build them into some of the bigger picture conversations that we want to have with all of you. I want to make a note here that all of this kind of thoughtfulness and questioning about how is the system building out, what is this going to look like, we're so excited to see that. Also because the more that this community is continuing to be engaged in Bahamas, the more that those networks can be engaged and we can continue to get people noticing and paying attention to how this builds out. So we're really excited about the questions we've been getting in. The first one on here is, with the scale of damage, is it even possible to rebuild? That's, a really great question. Especially in Abaco, you have areas that were completely flattened. I'm sure many of you have seen the media that's come out, the images of areas. There was a community called the Mud that had a lot of, kind of almost shanty types of home structures that didn't necessarily have resilience to a hurricane, especially one like Dorian. There's two kind of pieces to this. One is that there are areas where it doesn't make sense for organizations or the government to rebuild because they will be especially vulnerable to hurricanes in the future. So the government has established no build zones in certain parts of Abaco. That being said, these communities are beautiful and there is so much capacity, so much energy, so many resources. We've seen, from the private sector, a new initiative called Project Resurrect. We've seen, organizations like us making the commitment for the long-term recovery, and ultimately what it takes is for our volunteers to get out in the field to start, putting things back, for us to come together with all of these other NGOs, with the government, to keep pushing forward. So we do have confidence that it is possible to rebuild. It will be about being mindful in the rebuild process, not only choosing areas that aren't going to be as vulnerable, but also making sure that our build practices are effectively implemented. So we use the Build Back Better technique when we're building schools, and I think that kind of emphasis is reflected in the government's discussions about shifting building codes so that that's standardized across the board. But I think the question gets to what is a really core challenge here, which is that a lot of people don't feel hope that their communities can rebuild. And that's why I think this incredible network of humans and what we can do to show that it is possible, and we just have to put our hands to it, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. The second question, which I actually think you already touched on as well, is where do you even start to get the recovery process going? And it is exactly what Ashley just said, and what we've been trying to do here in terms of coordinating with others, because every organization has its strength and what it can offer, and bringing those all together helps that recovery process be more holistic.
This is where it's also really useful. I would encourage a lot of you to take a peek at some of the different structures that the United Nations and different emergency management offices across the world use for the emergency support function structure. Part of splitting out pieces like logistics or early recovery, debris management, it allows that sequencing to develop so that we can get a sense of, okay, we know that the building of homes is going to be a core part of how recovery happens, but people need sources right now. They need a place to stay while those structures are being built. So what do? We see the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, coming into play and working with groups like Shelterbox to make sure that there are those temporary shelters in place to serve people while those other structures are coming into play. And we see those conversations from like the Public Works Ministry about, okay, we know that debris management, debris removal is going to be a part of what we're doing. How do we position ourselves so that there's a place for all that debris to go, so that when groups like us are coming in and mucking and gutting houses, we know that it's not going to go into a spontaneous landfill, but it's going to have a place to go. But that sequencing is definitely a challenge. We're working with our partners and making sure that we're continuing to have that long kind of view of the trajectory, while also making sure that we're staying in a space where our partners and the government has the room to do that sequencing and implementation for structure development first.
So the next question is, how many people are unaccounted for over here? I believe in the last coordination meeting, but the last number I heard was about 1,300 were unaccounted for. They believe this is for a variety of reasons. Most people, for example, have evacuated from Great Abaco, have left. And while most came to New Providence, where Nassau is, not all did. Many people have family on other islands. They have family in the States, and they didn't necessarily go to the evacuation centers or the specifically designated places. So that number is all encompassing of people that they don't know where they have been.
Yeah, I think it's been, a challenge for the folks who are here. And, I really kind of send my heart out to folks who are on those search and rescue teams where, the scale of damage means that there are many lives that were lost. And, we were sitting in a meeting today and somebody had this really kind of strong message that, not only did those people who were there experience that trauma, but this is really something that the Bahamas as a whole experienced collectively. And I think that notion of having this holistic service, this connection where, we're also seeing groups that are talking about mental health. We saw folks from Israel at our Ministry of Education meeting today. Local groups as well. I see a question there that we'll get to in a bit on kind of the local organizations we've been really impressed by, but talking about how we have to think about the country as a whole, that everybody is experiencing this together, and by working together, we can make that service more effective. Maybe this is a good moment to talk about some of the local organizations we've seen. So we've seen Head Knowles has been an organization we're excited to see in a number of these different rooms. They're a relief organization that's Bahamian that did a lot of response to Hurricane Joaquin. So they're standing up their capacity and operations. And I know they've been really busy, but we're excited to see the work that they're doing. Some of the other folks exciting to see in kind of, especially in this education realm as we think about schools. We saw the Bahamian Reef Environment Federation come in and talk about, climate change education and exposing kids to like swimming in water and how to be safe. That was a really cool group to see.
There's another really great local group called Hands for Hunger, which is a local NGO here, and they've done amazing work in terms of feeding, but also focusing on the mass shelters here in Nassau, and taking the lead in these large coordination meetings to understand, what are the conditions that people are living in and how can we improve them? What are the needs and how can we meet those needs? So they've been very impressive as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we've also seen the Hopetown Volunteer Fire Department. I think folks who have been watching the Dorian relief effort, I mean, what a phenomenal job that group is doing, just grassroots. And I think it's emblematic of what we'll see in a lot of disaster spaces, where it's really local organizations that just decide like, okay, we know this is going to be a challenge. We're going to stand up and we're going to figure it out. Groups like what Sage was talking about at the beginning, private sector individuals who just decided like, you know what, we're going to figure this out. And folks will say like, we know this isn't our expertise, but the reality is like, just by virtue of individuals making that stand, it's one of the strongest capacities that develops in the face of any disaster area. So we've been really impressed by those groups, and we're excited to see how that keeps building out.
Absolutely. The next question is, how much money has been raised so far? So we are incredibly excited. Thanks to the generosity of Norwegian Cruise Lines and the match they provided, we've been able to raise $3.5 million so far. So we just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's contributed to that. It has made a huge difference. We do plan and want to be here for the long term. So we would love to be here for 2 years, which we project will need a minimum of $5 million to do. So although we've raised an amazing amount, we still want to raise more because we want to be here for as long as possible so we can continue into that long-term recovery.
Yeah, I would highlight here too, we're a part of an initiative that's called Resilient Response, which is all about how do we mobilize giving in a way that is thoughtful towards this long-term recovery. And it's exactly about what plugging into what Sage just described, that you're going to see millions of dollars pushed out, already spent in the Bahamas in this immediate period. But there's this really long path that the Bahamas has to kind of go on to engage its full recovery process. And so as you're thinking about giving in the face of disaster, not just only for Hurricane Dorian, but for future hurricanes as well, keeping an eye on that piece. What is the organization or set of organizations that are going to be there for the long term, and how can I mobilize that capacity? That's a really key piece to think about. And I would also encourage you all to check out the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. They have really great information about how that piece works as well. So yeah.
So the next set of questions are more program-based and logistical. So the first one is, what is the scope of work? So we are still determining exactly what the scope of work is going to be, but most likely it is going to be our traditional response scopes of work. So we're looking at mucking and gutting, we're looking at debris removal, potentially mold sanitation, and then there are potentials for other types of work, such as tree removal, chainsaw work, and things along that nature. But because we're still assessing and we want to make sure we are looking at the greatest need and how we can fill that gap, we can't say for sure that it's going to be X, Y, and Z, but we're looking at response work to start.
Yeah. Again, it all comes back to this piece of being dynamic and being community oriented in our process. And so what's incredible about All Hands and Hearts, about the way that we're able to mobilize volunteers, is that you're able to come in, many of you with this knowledge already, and because of our incredible partnerships that we're building, because of our knowledge and what we're creating in terms of capacity right now, means that we can make sure that your energy is plugged in to the best possible place to have the most impact possible. So we're really excited about how that's building out, and we're excited to start seeing people on the ground soon. We did have a question here about how soon can volunteers start. We have been overwhelmed in a very positive way by the number of applications received for volunteering. We're so excited to see how many people want to come and be a part of the recovery process. We want to be mindful about making sure that there is a structure, that there's a base, that there's work to do so that your time here is spent, working hard and having the largest possible impact. We are projecting that October 1st is when we are going to first have our first set of volunteers coming in here. And what's amazing to think about is because we're looking at a 2-year timeline, there's going to be so much time to be engaged here. And we're so excited to see people come here. I would say, if you are ready to hit the ground running, if you want to start volunteering right now, keep in mind that we do have many other incredible programs that are active as well that also need volunteers in Florida and Texas. So definitely keep your eye on those as well, but know that we're going to see volunteers coming in here within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we're excited to see many folks come on in through here over the course of the next 2 years. I think we're projecting like 1,000 volunteers over the course of 2 years, which is awesome. So cool.
So I think the last question is, where will the base be set up? And this goes back to our team that's working so hard on Great Abaco to try and get this base solidified. We do have a potential base that's right around Marsh Harbor. So we are looking in that area to set up. But as I said before, there are so many logistical challenges, and we want to make sure that we have a space that can welcome volunteers. And that's not only the physical space, that also touches on the larger supply chain and the challenges around getting things like electricity back up, but also food and water. So those are all challenges we need to solve sustainably before we can open our doors.
All right.
So I think that's all the questions we
can
have,
look here too.
unless there are more that people have put in.
Yep, local organizations chatted about those. Oh, that's my neighbor. Hi, Helen. Hello, New York City. It's so cool to see so many people tuning in. What is happening with the mental health of the victims and volunteers during this long-term recovery? A great question. We're seeing a massive need in terms of mental health, in terms of psychosocial care across the entire landscape of both victims from the hurricane, but as well as everybody who's responding. In a lot of our meetings, it's been highlighted as a gap in many ways. You have, I think it's 1,000 people who are in shelters here in Nassau. And, as we've been talking to a lot of locals, a lot of people who have experienced this hurricane, there is a sense of hopelessness. And I think, you have all of these organizations. I know that the Ministry of Social Services has been really active as well in figuring an outreach process to begin to address the larger community's trauma from this experience.
And I will say that, as daunting and challenging as the whole thing is, in the meetings we've been attending, it has been something that's consistently mentioned. So people are aware that is a high priority, and it's something that needs to be addressed, and they want to address it. And they are also aware of they need to address it the right way. And there are a lot of best practices and lessons learned from previous disasters that a lot of agencies can bring in to help in that space. And it's all about sharing those in order to help the people most effectively.
Yeah, and then in terms of volunteers and staff, speaking for ourselves, for All Hands and Hearts, in our process of getting ready to be deployed here, we, had a pretty intensive, phone calls, conversations with mental health professionals about how to prepare ourselves to see the level of devastation that exists here. We're really glad to have, some of those mental health support functions within our organization, but there is something really important for every person who is involved in this work, whether you are a staff volunteer or somebody who has experienced a disaster, to not be afraid to take advantage of the different types of counseling opportunities that present themselves in these areas. I think it definitely takes courage, I think, to be able to say, like, this is something that I need to talk about, because it is traumatic. It is extremely challenging to see these types of circumstances, but when we destigmatize that and talk about that as a community and support each other as a community, that's how we're all able to collectively recover. And so we're really glad to see those accredited organizations. We're also really excited that in our connections at the Institute for Disaster Mental Health might be giving us some advice as well. That type of connectivity is really important in this space. That's my mom. Hi, Mom. Who all is a part of Resilient Response? I love this question. Resilient Response is one of my favorite things that All Hands and Hearts is a part of. So it is an initiative that is between All Hands and Hearts, Good 360, our wonderful in-kind partners who do a great job of mobilizing donations into areas that need it, as well as the One Star Foundation, which is in Austin, Texas, and does a phenomenal job mobilizing nonprofits, government entities, a number of different local organizations in the Texas space for disaster work. Those organizations all really work together to amplify this message around what it means to give in a way that's sustainable. We held the Resilient Response Summit this past summer, and we had a number of incredible partners there. Oh my goodness, there were so many of them. We saw Citgo help us out with that, Mattress Firm be a part of it, our friends at the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, Rebuild Texas was there, a lot of different entities from both like kind of corporate partners, UPS Foundation, as well as, from the kind of nonprofit side to come together and talk about what does it mean to have resilience in a disaster space. We're excited to see that conversation continue to grow, so that hopefully more giving can be done in a way that's sustainable and translates into really tangible benefits for communities over the course of the long term. Yeah, okay. Have you hired staff?
So we are in the process of hiring staff at the moment. The open positions are posted on our website. The challenge with hiring in this response phase is that it happens very, very quickly. Because we want to get our program open and we want to get people in and to work, we're making these decisions very quickly. So I appreciate everyone that has sent in your resumes and your interest. It has been amazing to see everyone willing to come out and work with us. And yeah, we are currently in the process and hoping to have the core staff hired by next week.
And I would encourage you guys again to keep in mind, this is a 2-year program. It's going to include some moments of staff turnover, folks who spend some time here and then go on to the next thing. So continue to keep your eyes on it. Stand with us in the long-term recovery mindset. The more that we can all kind of keep that, I think we can get more people involved, which is always pretty cool. So, great. Will there be need for any medical staff? Yeah. So another great question. We've been excited to see a number of different medical focused organizations that are on the ground here. Something really important to keep in mind, especially in the medical kind of space, is that being verified or going through a vetting process that makes sure the government knows that you are a medical professional is a key aspect of what's happening as those types of professionals are coming on the ground. So we're seeing a lot of different medical folks come into different organizations. There's definitely a need, but there is a process. And so whether you come through with us or if you go with a different organization, make sure you're asking those questions about, how is this process being engaged? Are we, registered with the government entities? Because that collaboration is really important. Within All Hands and Hearts, I can say that we're excited for some of the work that our partners at Project Hope are doing on the ground. And we're excited about different kinds of opportunities that exist for organizations to be building clinics. And so we're, there's definitely room, I can say, within our volunteer community. If you have medical backgrounds, we really welcome you, and we're always excited to just mobilize the people who come into our community as effectively as possible. But I would encourage you to take a look at Project Hope, and yeah, definitely keep that in mind. To a similar point, in terms of distribution, one of the biggest challenges here is also unsolicited donations. So especially as it applies to medical supplies, different medical facilities will be really overwhelmed if they get a huge influx of supplies that they don't necessarily need, and they then have to kind of absorb the challenge of sorting or storing those donations if they don't have room for it. So definitely continue the giving. Consider doing it in a way that provides monetary donations to organizations that you trust, and of course we'll hope that you consider us. But keep in mind as you do the physical donations that there is limited capacity for storage, and it needs to be needs-based. So we're also working with our partners, again, Good 360, we absolutely love, because they can mobilize a lot of that giving as effectively as possible. But that's, something to remain mindful of. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's great to see some awesome shout outs from St. John. Yeah.
So I think that covers most of the questions. Do you see one?
Oh, how often can we expect a live stream update from Bob? Bob.
Oh,
Hi,
Bob. Hi, Bob.
I
don't know.
I don't know how often we'll be doing
We'll
this. A lot of it will kind of depend on, demand. We're staying in touch with our incredible marketing team. A shout out to Juan for her coordination of all of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to keep an eye on our social media on Instagram, Facebook, and we'll see.
Maybe we'll be back.
Oh. We'll be back. Oh my goodness, is that? Oh, perfect. Yeah, and then great.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that covers all the questions so far. We just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in and for your support in the past, as well as your continued support.
Yeah, and if you want to stay involved, if you want to continue to be a part of the work that we're doing, we would encourage you to just continue to pay attention, to continue to share it within your networks, whether that be tangibly on social media or just like by having a conversation. One of the most impactful things that individuals can do is maintain public interest in forgotten communities after the media has left. So just by virtue of continuing to talk about this, to share these stories, that's immensely impactful. If you feel compelled to, we of course encourage you to give. Feel welcome to go to our website, allhandsandhearts.org, to see the work that we're doing in more depth, as well as sign up to volunteer, whether it be here, whether it be around the world. We welcome you, and we're so glad to be empowered by the incredible work that you give to us and by the way that we can hopefully set you up for success in this space. So thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.